Today, US and China heated clash as Beijing pushed away ships in South China Sea. South China Sea tensions spiked between the US and China when two ships came within 45 yards of each other, with Beijing trying to push the US ship out of the way. The footage shared by the US Navy displayed just how close a Chinese vessel came to its US counterparts as the forces undertook freedom of navigation patrols. As the ships drew closer to one another, Chinese military personnel could be seen preparing buoys to absorb any impact between the ships. The Chinese military defended its actions following the patrol in September 2018. They said China resolutely opposes efforts from other countries to challenge its sovereignty. The near miss occurred in the Spratly Islands chain, which has been at the center of hostile disputes between Beijing and its neighboring Asian countries. According to Professor Carrie Brown of Chatham House, the lack of regular messaging between Chinese and US ships could be the cause of inadvertent conflict between two of the world's most deadly forces. He said there could be a misunderstanding, there could be an instance where it escalates. At the moment, dialogue between the US and China military to military is poor. Some people say it's worse than between the USSR and the US during the Cold War. There was a lot more contact then than there is now with China, therefore misunderstandings are horribly possible. China has attempted to assert its authority over 90% of the South China Sea with its 9-line claim. The South China Sea is hotly contested because of its lucrative shipping lanes, capacity for military strategic advantages and wealth of natural resources such as oil and minerals. At the center of this disagreement are various island clusters such as the Spratly Islands and the Paracel Islands. China has had particularly tense relations with Vietnam and the Philippines over islands in the region. Island claims are important because under the UNCLOS or UN Convention on the Law of the Sea negotiated in the 70s and 80s, there are no provisions granting ownership of waters without regard to land-based sovereign rights. Despite pushback from UNCLOS and other countries near the South China Sea, Beijing has undertaken intense militarization of the region. Described by many as island fortresses, China has engulfed the South China Sea with man-made island bases. The islands boast runways, hangars, control towers, helipads and radomes, as well as a series of multi-story buildings that China has built on reefs. The moving of its aircraft carriers, airstrips and weapons into the region has earned the cluster of bases the nickname, the Great Wall of Sand. Furthermore, fears of a major conflict erupting in the Asia-Pacific surged after the Trump administration announced the U.S. is reforming its first fleet for the first time in over 40 years. The announcement was made by Kenneth Braithwaite, Donald Trump's naval secretary. The new fleet will take responsibility for security of the seas around Southeast Asia and the Western Indian Ocean. Analysts have widely interpreted the move as being aimed at China, America's main regional rival. Beijing has claimed sovereignty over a large chunk of the South China Sea, overlapping with rival claims from 6 other countries, sparking fears of war. Announcing the decision to the U.S. Senate's Armed Services Committee, Mr. Braithwaite said, "In order to improve U.S. posture in the Indo-Pacific, we will reconstitute the First Fleet, assigning it primary responsibility for the Indo and South Asian region as an expeditionary fleet. This will reassure U.S. partners and allies of U.S. presence and commitment to this region while ensuring any potential adversary knows we are committed to global presence, to ensure rule of law and freedom of the seas." America hasn't had a First Fleet since 1973, when it also covered the Western Pacific. This indicates a significant increase in the U.S. interest in the region. Currently, the US has 6 fleets, each of which are based around a particular region of confronting a specific threat. A home port for the reformed First Fleet has yet to be announced, though Singapore is widely seen as a possible candidate. Explaining this, Mr. Braithwaite commented, "The First Fleet would be expeditionary." A senior defense analyst at the Rand Corporation argued the move is directed at China. He stated, "In order to protect those sea lines of communication from the threat of Chinese interference, it would make sense to ramp up patrols of that region, in concert with India but also with other like-minded countries, Australia and Japan." However, Mr. Grossman noted the decision could be reversed by the incoming Biden administration. Democrat Joe Biden will be inaugurated as president on January 2020. Mr. Grossman noted, "This is kind of late in the game with the Trump administration making this kind of decision. So we will see if it sticks going forward into 2021. Tensions between China and the US have risen dramatically during Mr. Trump's 4 years as president. The two superpowers have clashed over trade, the coronavirus, human rights, Hong Kong, Taiwan and the South China Sea. Beijing maintains Taiwan, which has a population of 23 million, is an integral part of its territory and has threatened a military resolution to the dispute. The US refuses to accept this or Beijing's claim of sovereignty over the South China Sea. America, and other Western countries, regularly send warships through the South China Sea on freedom of navigation patrols to demonstrate their rejection of the Chinese claim. Meanwhile, China's sweeping communications network in the Spratlys will have a decisive role to play in Beijing's crisis management plans to deal with its increasing tensions with the US in the South China Sea, according to military reports and analysts. Several scenarios under consideration in Beijing feature the 7 artificial islands which cover about 1,300 hectares of coral reefs in the disputed Spratly archipelago. A report in Chinese military magazine Naval and Merchant Ships said the US had tried to create a gray zone by forming a mini NATO in the Pacific to counter China, in a C-shaped arc linking India, Singapore, Taiwan, Japan and South Korea. Beijing should take countermeasures to cope with the US gray zone tactics and let the US realize China is neither a passive receiver nor regional guest in Washington's Indo-Pacific strategy, but a key player and master in the region, according to the analysis in the December edition of the magazine, run by the Chinese Navy's main contractor China State Shipbuilding Corporation.